And now, the moment you've all been waiting for. You're tuned in to Tapped Out. Hosted by Brendan Tobin and Sean Levine. Only on the BetQL network.
We're all wrong. Good Saturday evening to you, wherever you're checking us out. All over the place on the BetQL network. Or maybe even on Twitch at twitch.com/BetQL. You can check out my dimple. Not multiple, just one. I have one dimple and one lazy eye. So if you want to see what that looks like, check it out. Brendan Tobin, much better looking. And then you got our producer, Jake Noacker. What can you do? Coming up to finish off the show, we'll go ahead and take a preview and see what's looking ahead to next Saturday night, Vegas 68. Sergey Spivak takes on Derek the Black Beast Lewis, and then UFC 284. We mentioned a little bit, Volkanovski versus Islam. Those odds, they are a-changing. And I'll tell you exactly what's going on in our final segment. But big news, lots of fight announcements this week, Brendan. And one of them that is not official, but is being teased very heavily, including by the guys themselves. It looks like we're going to get the Ultimate Fighter, Conor McGregor, versus El Kakui, Tony Ferguson. And I'm as excited as anybody for Conor coming back. And I would watch Conor fight Nate, or you, or a lion. I don't care. He's Conor McGregor. I'd watch him fight anybody. But I have less to no interest in him fighting Tony Ferguson. Tony Ferguson, dude, let's be honest. Tony Ferguson shouldn't be in the promotion. If he wasn't an icon, if he didn't have a pretty good relationship, or at least a long-lasting one with the promotion, he's Donald Cerrone. Like, he's a has-been. He's a guy that was really close to being the guy several times. But he's not anymore, and I understand it. I get it. They need Conor McGregor to beat somebody when he comes back. But did they have to give him this guy? Terrible.
A lot of it, I don't disagree with you, dude. Like, it's if out of all the options they could have gone with, Michael Chandler,
so many options.
Go get Nate back, or do Jorge, all these options, and they're going with Tony, who just lost to Nate Diaz.
Keep going. Tell Patty Pimblett to get real fat and fight him. I mean,
yeah,
Dustin Poirier.
I'm surprised by a couple of
Covington.
things. I'm surprised by a couple of things. One, I'm surprised that Conor's gonna do the Ultimate Fighter. Like, they must be paying him a boatload to do that,
right?
Because is that like just a research? Like, here's our Hail Mary to make the Ultimate Fighter a thing. I mean, like, that feels like it's been supplanted by Dana White's Tuesday Night Contender Series. I certainly don't watch the Ultimate Fighter like I used to. And then the idea that it's Ferguson, like, I know that they have some personal beef because of the breakup from a management standpoint with Paradigm Sports. So there's some juice there that certainly could be. I think it'll be a good back and forth fight promotion. I just don't know. I don't know how many people will have that appetite. And it's funny you mentioned Don Cerrone, because it felt very much like, all right, Conor's going to fight Cowboy, but Cowboy, felt like he was on the back nine, if already not on the 18th. And it feels very much like Tony's the same way. So who can we give him to just get Conor a win? That is very much what this feels like. Unless Tony can somehow drag this fight into deep waters somehow and get Conor tired.
Producer Jake, since you go to those shady websites anyway, see if you can find us some weird website that has odds for this, because before we find out, what do you think they are? I can't believe that I would say Conor McGregor would be a huge favorite in this comeback fight, because of all those guys that you mentioned, whether it was Poirier, whether it was, basically anybody but Nate. If he comes back against Nate, that's kind of a pick 'em for a million reasons. But if it was Chandler, if it was, heck, even Masvidal, like, Conor's going to come back, I think, as an underdog. And this one versus Tony Ferguson, who hasn't won a fight since the Nixon administration and doesn't have the chin anymore, and is one of the more, like, even in that fight versus Nate Diaz, it was fun, but very robotic, and ultimately Nate ended up choking him. So I just don't, I don't think, I'd be shocked. By the way, what if Tony Ferguson won? If Ferguson won, he's not going anywhere, and then Conor is done. So
if Conor loses to Tony Ferguson, a lot of pressure. An interesting twist. You're saying there's a lot of pressure on Conor on this one. It's almost a don't lose. I mean, it's a can't lose.
There would be more pressure if you're fighting Michael Chandler, because he might just kick you in the face. With Tony Ferguson, if he catches you, dude, he's pretty slow and robotic at this point. And I sound like I'm disrespecting Tony Ferguson. He's one of my all-time favorite fighters. but all that is past tense. We'll see with
Yeah.
Conor also. We haven't seen what he's looked like. A lot of the rinse and repeat what we were saying with John Jones.
I mean, look, you're talking about two guys that were running the lightweight division 4 years ago, like between, Tony versus Khabib never happening. I mean, if we would have gotten this fight then, how thrilled would we have been that we would have gotten Tony versus Conor McGregor? I don't think people would have thought Conor would ever fight Tony just based on cardio, his submission game, all of that stuff. I feel like people would think that Conor would avoid somebody like Tony. It's just a case of, I don't think he's got that in him anymore. Sometimes it just feels like when you're shot. Tyron Woodley, it just feels like when you're done, you're done. Donald Cerrone feels like when you're done, you're done. Like it's outside of like some moments, maybe that round before he got his face kicked off by Michael Chandler. Like, we have not seen Tony look like that Tony. Jake's giving us the odds. He says right now Conor is minus 300. Tony's plus 50. I'm honestly surprised it's not more wide.
Me too. Like, Conor should be, especially because it's Conor. People want to bet on him. Now, you can't make it too big. Well, I suppose you can, because your boy Jorge Masvidal has a fight coming up with Gilbert Burns, and you look at the odds for that one. Right now, Gilbert Burns is minus 500. And for people that like to bet but don't really understand the numbers quite yet, or they're new, the way that works is if you want to win $100, you have to risk 500 for Gilbert Burns. Right. The flip side of that is you can make some pretty good money if you put down $100. You can win 400 if you take Jorge Masvidal. It is kind of weird that we're seeing these boxing type of odds for these big UFC fights. Most of the time when we see these main events, it's a plus 180 or a minus one, whatever it is. We get a lot of pick'ems. These are very one-sided, at least on paper.
I got to be honest with you. If there was a boxing match main event that I could get, like it was like a minus 500, I'd be thrilled. Like, wow, that's actually competitive for boxing.
That's what I'm saying.
Like sometimes you're looking at like minus 1,500 for the favorite. It's just like, it's crazy. Some of the odds you'll see with how non-competitive the matchups will be in a main event. But I almost feel like by the end of this, like they'll look very similar to those Gilbert Burns Masvidal odds. I think that, once people, once the action really comes in on it, I just feel like the Tony disrespect is going to get to a point where maybe I'll even think about throwing something on him, just because, like, maybe.
No.
Just maybe.
No.
Catches him in something, dude.
As a good friend of mine and somebody that kind of cares about your money, because you're a good family man, don't do that. I've done that.
It's a little submission, just a little. Conor goes into something.
No, that's exactly what I put myself into. No, remember, and then he looked good in that first round versus Chandler, and I'm texting you boys in our group chat. I'm like, told you so. See, it's gonna go the distance, Tony. But then he got his face kicked off. So no, that's not gonna. Although according to the odds, it's more likely that Tony Ferguson beats Conor McGregor than Jorge Masvidal beats Gilbert Burns, and I tend to disagree with that. And it's more because I don't think Tony has anything left. I wouldn't. Look, as much fun as I like to have at Masvidal's expense, he has fought a bunch of beasts. This is another one. And at some point, when you're used to that type of competition, it's not like he's taking a step down, really. Like, when you're talking, this is the same quality of fighter that he's fought now. When's the last time that he didn't fight? So this is going to be Gilbert Burns, Colby. Then you got the two fights.
Two against Usman.
Kamaru. Who did he fight before that? Like, it has been an absolute.
Nate Madison Square Garden finished him. He knocked out Ben Askren in 5 seconds. Probably Darren.
To be fair, you could argue.
I would say Darren Till.
I was going to say Nate might be the exception to the rule.
I would say, like, that was the last time we probably thought Darren Till was going to do anything, was versus Masvidal. And remember, Till knocked him down in the first round after Jorge kicked him right in the junk. And then Jorge put it on him, and that, started his magical 2019. But it's been a while for him. I get it. Like, Gilbert's hot. Gilbert has a lot of skill sets. I feel like it's a little too fat for Masvidal. I think it's a little too disrespectful, but I get it. I don't think it's outrageous that he's that big of an underdog. But I definitely feel like Tony. I definitely feel like the Tony, because we just haven't seen him look competitive. It's not even just a matter of losing. Like, he's been losing and hasn't, like, won rounds, dude. He's looked like that more recently. But then I guess if you look at it on the other side, Gilbert, has looked like a killer, and Conor really hasn't. So is that probably plays into it too? Like maybe people just believe, like, you know what, Conor's just not that good anymore. And let's also not forget, is coming off of a devastating injury. So, maybe I will play that Tony Ferguson submission that night, dude.
No,
Like, you know what?
don't
I think I'm gonna do it. You know
do
what?
that. Don't
I
do
think I'm
that.
gonna
No,
do
you're
it.
going to be throwing your money away. Look, and also with Conor, not to get too far ahead of ourselves, but we all assume that he's going to beat Tony Ferguson. Then what? Like at some point, bro, you're going to have to fight somebody, and there's a pretty big step up in competition with all those other names that we talked about. Like, do you really think he could beat Dustin Poirier? Do you really think that he could beat a Colby Covington? Do you really think that at this point in his career he can beat any of these, Michael Chandler, even these names that we're throwing out there? Of course he could. But is it likely? No. This fight is very, very, very likely that he wins. How many eyeballs do you think are going to be on that? Like, us geeks are going to be watching it, and it's the return of Conor, but it's kind of the return of Conor. Like, there's not a whole lot of danger, it feels like, on the other side. My interest level was going to be a 10, not knowing who the opponent was, and now that I know who it is, it's like a 3.
Really? It's gone down that much?
Yeah. Dude, Tony Ferguson is who they came up with. Again, your son has now had 3 lessons down there on South Beach, right? He's been doing a little BJJ. Get him in there. If they need him to beat somebody.
Tony?
Yeah.
He did the other.
Well, he might. No, here's the problem. Your son might beat Tony. That's the issue.
It's not going to happen.
He might beat him.
It's not going to happen. No, I'm saying, I think the thing that's going to be interesting is the Ultimate Fighter. Is this going to be something that oversaturates it? Or is it going to add to the drama? Like, is it going to be a really, really fun buildup and we're going to really want it? Because it's definitely going to be the first Ultimate Fighter I'm at least going to start watching for the first time in a long time. I'm going to fire up my ESPN Plus and check it because I didn't watch. What was the last one? Was it Amanda versus Juliana? Like, I didn't watch any of that. And that had some juice to it. I didn't watch any of that. So I'll definitely check that out. And I think it will be a good fight buildup. But I do agree. I do think that they could have gone with a lot sexier options for sure. But man, I might put some money on that Tony submission, dude.
You're ridiculous, dude.
I think I might, dude.
That. No, don't do that. You're throwing your money away. I wonder what you're going to do with your money when it comes to Israel Adesanya versus Pereira. 1, 2, 3. This is now technically the 4th time that they've fought each other. Izzy hasn't won yet. And I'm looking at the odds. And it's not like he's like kind of a favorite. Right now, he's a minus 150 to win this fight. It feels like it sounds like you're trying to throw your money away or like put it down on something. Maybe betting against Izzy would be a little bit smarter since, he hasn't ever beat this guy. I'm not saying, I'm just saying maybe that's a better investment.
I get it. I understand why you would completely go with that's like the Chael Sonnen logic. It's like, we know what happened. Why are we betting another way? It seems stupid. I get that. I think with Izzy, it's just a case of like, is he smart enough to get through the next fight without making the same mistake that he made this time around? And I do think that, you got to give him some credit that he's that good a fighter that, he can finally figure out the Pereira riddle that's been hanging over his head. If he doesn't, the thing is, if Pereira's shown you, he just needs a moment, and he looks like just one of the most devastating hitters in the sport. It's just different. The way that, he hit Sean Strickland and he buckled, the way that he hit Izzy, and it just really looked like it rearranged him. And, Izzy will sit here and say, oh, that stoppage was BS. I'm sure we'll hear a lot of that in the lead up of this fight, but he's got to be careful, dude. He's got to be super careful this time around. And you got to wonder for him, he hasn't had that grand offensive output and looked like that dangerous guy in a little bit. So can he execute with the same, type of confidence when that this guy has dusted you in 2 different sports?
That's a good point. Like, when is the last time we saw Izzy look like Izzy? I mean, there's no way it has to go all the way back to the. Okay, Whitaker. I thought it was
Whitaker. I mean, he has Whitaker. He has Whitaker's number. But no, there's been plenty of fights where we're like, he's on cruise control on this one. There's plenty of those that he has on his resume too.
That's the weird thing about him. Like, he's one of the all-time most interesting, highlight-filled fighters. But then again, he's got those fights versus like Joel Romero comes to mind, and even the Anderson
Vettori.
Silva fight to some extent, the Vettori fight, like, you know. But then again, he's so dominant, you can't really hold it against him. Israel Adesanya versus Pereira right now, plus 130 for the champion. Masvidal Burns is on that card. Also, Masvidal plus 400. Gilbert Burns is a heavy favorite at minus 500. Kevin Holland versus my boy Santiago Ponzinibbio on that card. Raul Rosas Jr. taking on Christian Rodriguez. And then Rob Font gets back on a main event card, takes on Adrian.
Could be jealous if it's down here, dude.
That's all in Miami, we think. Hopefully that goes down in Miami on April 8th. Speaking of Miami, that's Brendan Tobin. I'm the sports machine, Sean Levine. Coming up next, we tap out right here on the BetQL Network.